This is episode number 25 of Colorado TechCast.
The vision of WorkBright is really, in the long term, look at what we call the mission-critical workforce, which is this contingent workforce, and give it, for lack of a better term, the love it deserves. When you go up to a ski area, the experience you have of that area are the people who are in the ski school and running the lifts and at the hospitality end of the business. These are really the critical folks, the mission-critical workforce. And with WorkBright, over time, what we'd like to do is be able to provide greater support for this workforce to move between their engagements more fluidly so that they can find and lock in their next gig. So with the business that we're building, it's going to allow us to serve up to those contingent employees opportunities right for them. And then on the flip side of that, to work with employers to streamline the process so that they can really target those employees that are going to best serve their business.
Hey everybody, Trapper here. Thanks for joining me on this episode of Colorado TechCast. Colorado TechCast is a weekly podcast where I interview CEOs and founders of Colorado-based technology startups. Join me each episode as I explore the Colorado technology community from the inside out. My guest on Colorado TechCast today is David Secunda. Over the course of his career in business and entrepreneurship, David has led numerous organizations, including the Outdoor Education Program at CU, PlanetOutdoors, and the Outdoor Industry Association. He's also worked as an entrepreneur in residence at Mobius Venture Capital and Sequel Venture Partners. David's an active mentor in Techstars, MergeLane, and the CU Leeds School of Business, and has served on many boards, including the Entrepreneurs Organization Colorado, RMC Health, and the American Camp Association, and was a founding board member of Leave No Trace. Prior to his current venture, David was the founder and visionary of Avid4 Adventure, an outdoor education company that serves kids ages 3 and up. Avid4 Adventure was founded in 2003, served 14,000 campers this summer, and is number 25 on Outdoor Magazine's Best Places to Work in the U.S. His latest venture is WorkBright, an HR tech startup with services designed specifically for employers with large contingent workforces, such as ski resorts, summer camp, and gig economies like Uber, Lyft, Tackle, you name it. Companies like that frequently onboard and offboard large segments of their employee base at a time, and there are special challenges that come with that David will explain. Now, let's get started. David, thanks for joining us on Colorado TechCast today. Appreciate your time.
Trapper, total pleasure to be with you. I really enjoy kind of talking about the entrepreneurial journey, and it's kind of an honor to be in a spot where potentially something I could share could be of support on somebody else's journey forward. So I'm motivated to kind of walk through.
Can you tell us a little bit about your background?
My background is pretty diverse. I would not say I have any kind of a classic background. I spent a lot of my initial career in the outdoor industry. Initially, I was the director of outdoor education for the University of Colorado. Did that for a number of years, and then moved on to create I think of my first startups, a trade publication and a consumer magazine in the outdoor space, and did that for a couple of years, and then had one of the first Apple dealerships in Colorado, independent dealerships. That was a little foray, my first foray into technology, and then got hired by the Outdoor Industry Association. It's the trade association representing the outdoor manufacturers and retailers in the United States, and did that for a number of years, and that was a pretty formative learning experience. I got to open a Washington, D.C. office and a lobbying operation to create a census of sales, so to kind of measure very granularly all the sales in the industry by category through an audit process of all the retailers. I've got to do the first really participation research that existed in collaboration with the Gallup organization on things like climbing, mountain biking, kayaking, those sorts of things. So it's really just an amazing opportunity. And then from there, it was the beginning of the internet boom, and started a e-commerce company in the outdoor space. That company was called PlanetOutdoors. It was like a 1998, 99 start, and it was just a classic internet run at it. We went from zero to a few million in sales in a year or two, and zero to over 100 employees, raised over 20 million, sold the company within a 2-year period to the company that I was sure was going to succeed. It was MVP. It was the Gretzky, Jordan, Elway sporting goods online company, and so we sold to him in an equity deal, unfortunately, and a year later, after the bubble burst, after the acquisition, that had wound down. So worked for them in that time period as well, commuting back and forth to Chicago. And then from there, worked as an entrepreneur in residence for Softbank Venture Capital and Sequel Venture Partners out here in Boulder. And that, again, huge learning experience. Felt just really blessed to have that opportunity to do that, and have the opportunity to work really closely with Brad Feld and Rick Patch and other VCs in the area of their caliber. And really kind of got to sit on the other side of the table for a while, and that was quite interesting. And then ended up, after doing that, working as a consultant in that realm, just working with startups for a bit, and then started my next company, Avid4 Adventure. And that is a company that's mission is to engage kids in active outdoor lifestyles. It is a program that provides summer camps and outdoor education programs in California and Colorado. It's actually expanding to Portland this next year as well. And that had its humble beginnings. I think it was in 2003, 2004, and that has been continuing to grow to a nice size and a going concern. It's pretty, let's say, I think it's a little over 10 million in sales this year, has about 700 seasonal staff, and over 16,000 kids in summer programs in summer 2018. So that has continued to scale. And then in 2013, 2014, we had a lot of pain points around the process of hiring in that particular business. We're hiring hundreds of people in a 2-month period in a regulated industry. And so I looked around for some technology solutions and realized there's really nothing that was focused on this contingent workforce, meaning those that were hiring part-time, seasonal, and temporary workers and contract workers. And so talked to my colleagues, found out the pain points were pretty universal. And so 4 of us customer-funded this new company. We created an alpha product. We ran 1,000 employees through it. We went through a few regulatory audits, and everyone loved it. So we spun it out into its own company. That's WorkBright. I jumped on as CEO. We took it into Techstars 2014, did a round of funding in 2015, and then got it profitable in 2017, and have been kind of continuing to grow that forward.
All right, I just got to pause right there. That's phenomenal.
Yeah, I mean, I really enjoy these startup years, these startup experiences. It's pretty amazing.
So, how did you do it? Have you always been entrepreneurial, or how did you get the bug?
You know, I don't think that I would call myself always entrepreneurial. I remember. Let me just look here just for a moment, see if I can remember the name of this person. What is the other magazine? It's not Wired. It got started in the late 90s. I don't even know if it's still around. It's really entrepreneurial and very similar to Wired, but more broad-based than just tech. Does that ring a bell at all?
Like Fast Company or?
A Fast Company, that's it.
Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah,
they're still around, yeah. I haven't been reading them in a while. But basically I think it was 1997, I heard the editor of Fast Company talk at a conference, actually. And he was just talking about the beginning of the Internet revolution, about the startup process. And I remember sitting in that audience, literally as I share this, I feel like the shiver up my spine, because I remember that moment that he was sharing that, and I'm like, oh my God, I have to do this. I have no choice. Just like his description was so compelling in a way that he was sharing from his sheer enthusiasm and personal experience, and it was so infectious. I just was like, I must do this. This is the moment. And it was at that point that I started thinking about it and put together that first internet business. And I remember going home and talking to my wife, and I'm just like, man, this is tricky. I'm in this amazing position. I'm running the Outdoor Industry Trade Association. It was already the position of my dreams. It's like I'd worked in the outdoor industry, and there I was. It's like what I consider to be the pinnacle of that industry. I was working with like Royal Robbins and Yvon Chouinard and like all of these classic innovators in that industry. And yet I felt like if I didn't at that point go and start something new, it was really going to be potentially never that I made that move. So that was the first really deliberate jump across to get something going. And I had done other startups before, but nothing had been really venture-backed. Everything had been bootstrapped and grown, and they had been of moderate success, if anything. And it was at that point that I really surrounded myself with amazing advisors, folks who had done this before, and it was with their support and education that I feel like I got this, the equivalent of an MBA going through that venture curve of growing and funding and creating that company, PlanetOutdoors, in the late 90s.
So do you have a technical background, or it sounds like you were definitely gravitated towards the internet business?
Yeah, I'm not a technical, I'm non-technical, so I'm not an engineer. I got my degree in outdoor education and a degree in psychology. And so I would say I have an aptitude for technology, and I'd also say that I have a really deep interest and a really good vision for product. And it comes from just the view of the need for simplicity and just a very simple and compelling workflow. And so I enjoy kind of looking at products from that perspective and creating them as well. But it's nothing formal. I've always surrounded myself on any of these with great engineers that can not only execute technically, but bring great technical vision to the company and product as well.
So what was it like cutting ties with your day job first and then starting out on PlanetOutdoors? Was your wife supportive, or?
Totally. And yeah, no, it's so interesting. And so my wife, she's also an entrepreneur. She had her company for the last 17 years. She's actually just retiring right now. And so we have kind of handed the baton back and forth between us over the years on doing kind of the startup thing, and also financially supporting each other through those startup processes. And we've actually both worked for each other in each other's companies over time, which has been, pretty amazing experience for both of us. Not that we would choose to do it long term or forever term, but it was a real growth experience for us both to kind of work for each other in those contexts, and both to be the breadwinner and the receiver in our relationship. So she was absolutely supportive at the front end of it, and doing that company was probably the closest that I ever came to destroying my relationship. If you talk to entrepreneurs, it's addictive. It is like a drug. And as I was drawn in to doing that internet startup, it was literally all consuming. And I was, sleepless and just executing as much as I could. And at the end of that process, I realized that our relationship really needed repair. And I kind of vowed after that process that if I do another startup, I will not do it that way, that my path will be to really create a sustainable culture around anything else that I'm doing for both myself and all the folks around the table. So that process of kind of wearing both hats, the day job and doing the startup, is one, again, that's common to a lot of folks who have thought about doing a startup or done a startup. And I'm actually an advocate for it. I'm one who really is nudging people to stay in their day job as long as they possibly can until they have eliminated as much risk as possible in the new venture, and then jumping once you have such clarity that there's product market fit and that there's a clear path forward there. And I actually just finished a 6-month coaching program that I did for startups here in Boulder, and it was within that theme. It was for folks who are kind of working other jobs and want to work on a startup idea on the side and get it to a point where the risk is reduced to an acceptable level for them to kind of jump across without risking everything per se. So it's always difficult. Those are long hours with 2 irons at least in the fire, and plus family commitments if folks have them, and they are difficult. But again, I think it forces you to really think about the business to a point at which you have clarity that your odds are as good as they can be for success.
I like how you describe it as a drug, because it is addicting, right? There's an excitement and an energy in there like that you find nowhere else. So it sounds like you had a self-induced rehab where you got clean and vowed not to do it again.
Yeah, absolutely. I've done my best.
So take me back to the early days of PlanetOutdoors. What was the internet business back then?
Oh my gosh! I'm literally just taking a deep breath and just saying, wow, well, what a different world it was. I mean, just for one example, we probably spent $10 million building the infrastructure that 5 years later you could get in Yahoo stores for $100 a month. Just off the shelf. Like we had to build a server room. We needed anti-static floors and a battery that weighed 8,000 pounds and cooling systems. I mean, there were there's clearly no AWS, no server farms. It's like everything was in-house, including the commerce solution, which we built from the ground up, like every component of it. There was it was just, we were just new on the scene. It was very, very early in the process there. So there was both a feeling of frontierism and enthusiasm, and also just incredibly heavy lifting. It was everything was new. It's kind of like watching the cannabis industry here in Colorado right now. It's exciting to see because it literally is this new industry that is evolving and growing so quickly, and it's amazing to just see the innovation. But in the early days, like we're here in Boulder, Colorado. We leased the Alfalfa's natural food store administrative building. We built the server room. It was a completely funky building, like these little nooks and crannies, and I remember my first day there with 3 of us in this huge space. And then a couple months later, there were probably 30 of us. And then 6 months later, there were 70 of us. And it was just everything that we could do to grow as quickly as possible.
How were you guys funded back then? Did you have to seek VC money?
Yeah, I mean, we did an initial round with a local VC here in Boulder. They're no longer around, but it's called Canyon Capital. I think we raised like $500,000, and we started work on this. I had an amazing background for this because at the beginning of the internet, there was this huge issue around channel conflict. Like manufacturers didn't want to sell into the internet channel, and I had these relationships with every major manufacturer. I was able to open e-commerce with the North Face and Patagonia and you name it, like all of these companies that we were one of the first, if not the first. And so from a funding perspective, it was kind of a unique edge that I had and the company had as far as being able to kind of access this new commerce relationship with all of these major brands. So we closed that seed round, and then we went out. I think we did 3, at least 2, I think maybe 3 additional rounds. We raised a total of, I think, $26 million for that company. with brands like CMGI, and I mean it was like Silicon Valley funded the heyday of internet funders and companies. It was just it's kind of a blur at this point, but it was really riding that internet wave.
Then you sold it, right?
Yeah. So the market started to turn in the early 2000s, and I could see the lines were not going to cross. Meaning, it was clear that like the winds were changing, and I could see that the funding environment that I had been in, which was like just breadcrumb yourself to that next round, that was changing. And so it was very clear that we had to have a plan to get us to profitability, or we had to sell the company, because it was just those lines were not going to connect on the right timeline. And so we looked at that line to profitability, and we also at the same time pursued a potential acquisition partner, and that's kind of how that all came together. And so that was the unfolding of that.
So the equity deal, did it fall through, or did the company go bankrupt?
So no, the equity deal went through, and PlanetOutdoors became the outdoor division of MVP. We ran it there for about a year and a half, I would say, under the MVP logo. And that company did an orderly wind down. They did not do a bankruptcy, but they wound down as kind of the sky was falling. And John Costello was the CEO there. He had been the CEO of Sears before that. He went on to be the CMO of Yahoo, and then CMO of Dunkin', and just a number of big brands. Still a good friend of mine. He's actually an investor in WorkBright, an investor in Avid4 Adventure, and it was in retrospect, I realized how much I learned from him watching him manage such a difficult situation with so many employees through this orderly wind-down process with, so many different interests at the table. But that was a formative experience going through not only the build up, but the wind down. I had to go through a process of letting my employees go as we were merging into a Chicago company and just taking a few people with us. And the whole experience was the entirety of a company life cycle compressed into what seemed like a few minutes of time.
Wow. It's crazy to think back. During the first internet bubble, there was no, like you said, there was no Yahoo storage, there was no Gmail, there was no cloud-based solution. So everything you had to do customer as a one-off. Yeah. And I look at some of the companies these days, and you can spin up a data center with a credit card and an AWS account.
It's amazing. Yeah.
So do you think that, and just in your opinion, do you think the reason the first bubble happened was, and I shouldn't say the first bubble because I hope this isn't a bubble. So do you think the reason the bubble happened was because the technology hadn't caught up with the requirements and it was just too costly to run that way?
Well, I don't know. I feel like almost any new industry has this wave and surge of enthusiasm that then overpaces the reality, and then there's some kind of a correction. And then once it corrects, that continues to happen over time, but to less of an extreme degree. So I'm sure we'll have other corrections per se, but that one was just the first major reconciliation of reality to enthusiasm. And so, yeah, I don't really consider it a bad thing. It's unfortunate. I think it was hard learning for everyone around the table. But I remember as that was occurring, talking to people about other bubbles per se and other industries over the last decade, and I was thinking, oh, this one's different. This isn't a bubble, or this isn't an overinflation. And then realizing that they really had wisdom and had seen this movie before, and that it does kind of run its cycle.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the cannabis industry. It'll be interesting to see if that follows the same similar path, right?
Yeah, I think that it will. I think we'll have a huge surge of investment and innovation and valuation, and then things will correct over time.
Yeah, we'll have to see. So after selling your first startup, what did you do next?
That's when I went to work as an entrepreneur in residence for a couple of VCs.
What is an entrepreneur in residence?
So, this is actually interesting. So when I kind of wound down my experience at MVP, I was in this position of just, like, I had worked so hard for the previous years. And at that point, this is kind of the low point of my marriage when I had 2 young children. I had really, forsaken that relationship. And so it was a pretty major crossroads. And so I was talking with Brad Feld, and he had not funded PlanetOutdoors, but I had pitched him when he was at Softbank. And he invited me in and just said, Dave, I watched you in your actions at PlanetOutdoors. And, in this era, everything was on fire and just going away so quickly. But some people did it in good style, and some people really did not. And I saw from a distance you taking the best care that you could of your employees, of your customers, and of your investors. With that in mind, I'd like to see if you're interested in doing an entrepreneur in residence position. And I did. I was like, wow, awesome. Wow, total honor. What does that even mean? And he goes, well, basically, it's kind of like you come work for the VC, and you are creatively thinking about what might come next. And it's incredibly loosely defined. There's no requirement. We'll hire you for a year. Maybe you come up with an idea that we fund. Maybe you help us out looking at existing investments that are coming through. But really, it's kind of like it's just this position of funded creativity. You get an office. You're part of the firm. You're in on partners meetings, and you are just there to kind of rev up the creative juices and try and either yourself figure out the next thing or help them identify and invest in the next thing.
Was that with Softbank or was that with Foundry?
So that was with Softbank. So Softbank became Mobius became Foundry. So that was kind of the breadcrumbing along there. And it was both with them and Sequel Venture Partners. And we kind of split the role between the two of them. Sequel Venture Partners had been a funder, an investor in PlanetOutdoors. And so I spent about half my time at each of them.
So being an entrepreneur on your own and then being an entrepreneur in residence, what were the differences that you found? Like, was it more empowering to be in residence or vice versa?
It's really interesting. It's like, really, again, there I was in this position that, holy moly, I could not have dreamed of such an honor, like to go from an entrepreneur to get funded personally by two VCs to just think about what my next company would be. I was like, holy shit, this is freaking unbelievable. And at the same time, nothing came forth in that year. It was really, I worked on a number of different ideas. I took a couple of them forward to look for funding and just could not get anything over the finish line. And it was interesting because for me, it kind of felt like if you were a writer and somebody gave you a contract for a new book on an idea, and then they say, okay, go write it. You got 12 months. And then all of a sudden the whole context changes and you have writer's block, or it's just the creative thing just isn't happening. It's like, okay, you got to do it now. And can you do it now? So I would say that it was an amazing experience, and that network is one that has continued to benefit me. And it wasn't the most creatively, entrepreneurially successful period that I had as far as coming up with that next thing.
So how did you get to the next thing? I mean, were you thinking all along of kind of what you're going to do next, or did you just, it was time for something different and strike out?
Yeah, I'm always thinking about different ideas. I mean, I always have like a notebook full of like what's next, so to speak. And so after I left the VCs, I consulted a bit, and at that point, I just realized, like, gosh, this money is great, and I'm pretty much fully engaged, but I am far from my roots. I started as this outdoor educator, and here I was working with startups on funding strategy and channel strategy and investor presentations, and I was like, wow, this is pretty far from where I thought I would be. And I took a trip to Costa Rica, actually, with my family, with my 2 kids and my wife, for a number of weeks, and just had a lot of kind of soul searching at that point to deliberately think about the next thing. And I think there were 4 different ideas I was contemplating at that point, and one of them was this idea for Avid4 Adventure, the outdoor camps, and it was born out of the actual experience that I was having with my kids, where they were 3 and 5, which is camp age. I had never really experienced camp before, and as a parent, all of a sudden, I saw this amazing growth opportunity for my kids when they were participating in other camps. And in the back of my mind, there were these 2 things floating around. One was when I was at the trade association, the Outdoor Industry Association, I shared that we spent a lot of time running the numbers, looking at participation trends, and consistently kids' participation in human-powered outdoor sports, things like hiking, climbing, kayaking, it was on the decline. It was going down at that point. And so that was a trend that was concerning to me. And then I also noticed that my kids, even though I had spent so much time in the outdoors and kind of committed my career and lifestyle to it, they were pretty attracted to screen time and the classic non-outdoorsy pastimes. And I thought, wow, if my kids are pursuing these, then maybe there's a broader opportunity here. So that was the idea that percolated to the top out of the different things that I was looking at. And I went at it. Actually, it's so interesting thinking about this, looking in the rearview mirror, because this experience working at the venture capital firms and then consulting, it seemed like a non sequitur. It seemed like something that was off to the side. But what I really learned was this software startup methodology that I saw over and over again in these various startup environments, and then I was able to apply that in this outdoor space to literally something that never sees that sort of methodology, a camp industry. Like, I went in to start that business doing deep customer research and focus groups and surveys, and I mean, it was like going to do a new software company. And most people in that industry, they're starting businesses based on just personal passion. They're like, I love to do this. Other people are going to love this. I'm going to make a business out of it. And I mean, it's great industry to work in because of that passion, but it is also the case that many businesses don't make it, and there's a lot of downward price pressure because people price things not sustainably just because they want to be in that industry. And so the long and short of it is, it was with that methodology that I would consider the underpinnings for the success of Avid4 Adventure going forward. Like, right now, that company is very, very similar to what it was envisioned as in 2003. The programs, the regions, the whole 9 yards, and it was really through that methodology.
So they're still an active company, right?
Yeah, that's the one that has we had 16,000 kids in summer programs this summer, and it's about a $10 million company now.
Are you still involved in the management and the leadership of the company, or did you pass the reins?
Yeah, so I did pass the reins operationally. So my role is as visionary in the kind of entrepreneurial operating system. That's kind of what I use for most of my companies right now. So there's a CEO at the company, and my role is really to look 2 to 10 years out. Part of this whole commitment to this sustainable path for me and folks around the table, it was within Avid4 Adventure that it was really the laboratory within which I really, really worked on that. And Avid, like as I call it Avid, but it's Avid4 Adventure, one of our express goals was to make it the best job that each person had ever had or would ever have in the company. And we really went after that with just like a maniacal focus. And right now in 2018, Avid4 Adventure is number 3 in the country on Outside Magazine's Best Places to Work, and that's across all sectors, technology, outdoor, consulting, you name it. We're like number 3 on the list. And then it was also named Colorado's healthiest workplace by the governor a couple months ago. So it has really been one that has actuated that commitment to, or actualized that commitment to employees, and that is, I think, also what's created such a successful business, is just people who are passionate and really happy with what they're doing.
Those are really awesome stats to speak of. So when did you leave Avid4 Adventure?
It was in 2013 that I started working on WorkBright while I was doing Avid4 Adventure. And as I shared, it was kind of born out of the pain points of managing the technical aspects of hiring that many people that I was inspired to look at the opportunity in the HR technology space.
What's the issue with seasonal workers? Are they processed differently? Or are they onboarded differently than regular full-time employees?
Yeah, they are. So basically, the differences are they're numerous. So one is that an individual can be hired several times in 1 year. They could work for you in a summer program and then in a fall program. They could even have overlapping gigs. And most HR software is set up to hire one person one time, and then when they leave, they're basically deleted from the system in a way that if they come to work for you again, they have to start over and do all of their paperwork again. Regulated industries are often those that employ contingent workers. So anything that deals with healthcare, anything that deals with kids, like there's all of these requirements. So you have this combination of people onboarding, potentially multiple times a year for short durations, and then a complexity of paperwork. So it goes far beyond just a W-4 and a 9-9. It could be certifications and licenses and lots of policy documents and compliance documents. So an average company working in that sector could have upwards of 30 different documents for a new employee to complete. So existing systems not only did not accommodate the cadence of a seasonal worker or even a part-time worker coming back again, but also would not accommodate the tracking of licenses, certifications, expiration dates. It was really just made for the core HR function of W-4, I-9, handbook, and a few other things like that. And the other thing is that in general, this contingent workforce, and again, seasonal is one of them, but it's part-time, seasonal, temporary, and contract workers, that is now 40% of the United States workforce. The common tool across that workforce is the smartphone, as opposed to a computer, fax machine, printer, etc. And so at that point, none of these other solutions had anything that these workers could interact with through their smartphone exclusively. And so that was one of the leading underpinnings of WorkBright, was to create a solution that workers could do on their own time, on their own cadence. They could take pictures of their license, their passport, their first aid, their CPR. It would become part of the HR system, and it could all be accomplished through their smartphone.
So when you started WorkBright, did you immediately seek venture capital money, or how did you go about making the funding decisions?
Yeah, so initially, again, we customer funded the alpha solution, so it was kind of self-funded by 4 customers. And then I really felt like there was vast opportunity in the HR tech world, and that is kind of when I thought of taking it into Techstars as a participant company. And I had been a mentor at Techstars for about 7 years before that, so it was actually a really interesting experience to jump onto the other side of the table, hide in the corner, try and blend in, and really literally switch tables and end up on the other side of it. So it was within Techstars that we talked about it. My co-founder and I really felt like a venture path was the appropriate one for this in order to take advantage of the market opportunity. So we raised about $1.7 million and ended up, as I said, getting the company profitable on that, which is pretty rare for a tech company, and then have, at this point in time, have fueled our growth on cash flow. We're currently hiring 6 positions all on cash flow. We may seek funding in the future, and that would be to fund a further acceleration if we so choose.
So contingent workforce, does that apply to like the gig economy type stuff, or are they purely 1099?
No. It applies to everything in the gig economy. So everything from Uber to shift gig, folks who are employees and contractors. It is very, very broad. And in general, after the 2008 economic downturn, companies are looking to increase the size of their contingent workforce because it gives them additional flexibility without hiring FTEs at lower cost because they typically don't have benefits. And so the contingent workforce is a sector of the workforce that's grown 10% in the last 10 years and continues to grow as people kind of choose to put together a lifestyle of kind of independent gigs as opposed to settle down into a traditional full-time position.
Yeah, it seems like just like you said, the gig economy is exploding. Every time you turn around, there's a new service, whether they bring groceries to or they do your errands for you.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you guys definitely. You talked about the lines crossing. I think the lines are crossing. Perfect timing for your solution as well as kind of where we're seeing the shift in the industry go.
Yeah, we're pretty excited about it. The vision of WorkBright is really in the long term to look at what we call the mission-critical workforce, which is this contingent workforce, and give it, for lack of a better term, the love it deserves. Like, this is a workforce that is often last hired, first fired. They work difficult hours. They are the most flexible, and they are truly the brand of a company. When you go up to a ski area, the experience you have of that area are the people who are in the ski school and running the lifts and at the hospitality end of the business. So these are really the critical folks, the mission-critical workforce. And with WorkBright, over time, what we'd like to do is be able to provide greater support for this workforce to move between their engagements more fluidly so that they can find and lock in their next gig. And quite frankly, that is the biggest stress for folks working in the gig economy. Is like, well, what is the next gig? And when do I get that next gig? It's not that they necessarily don't want to be working those gigs. It's really just connecting the dots to the next one. So with the business that we're building, it's going to allow us to serve up to those contingent employees opportunities that are right for them based on the things that they've been doing in the past, their current certifications, their work history, those sorts of things. And then on the flip side of that, to work with employers to streamline the process so that they can really target those employees that are going to best serve their business, those with the right, again, certifications, background, experience, and who might be finishing up a gig somewhere else and looking for something. And we have both sides of that equation and connect those two things together. So, even in something like HR technology, which, by some measures can be kind of a boring field, we are really looking at this from a perspective of people, and how can we unload administration and really focus on the people aspect of both giving the best employee experience while they're coming to work for a company and when they're transitioning between companies, and giving the best administrative experience, meaning unloading the administration that typically deals with paperwork and allowing them to spend time with people, which is really why HR people get into the HR industry until they discover that there's so much administration overall. So I would say the common thread just across all of these things is really this focus on people. And as I have aged and done different startups over time, I realize that my job is kind of the air under the wings of those around me. And my job, especially today, is to support and provide an environment that provides literally for growth and transformation of my employees. And the success of the companies, they will follow. It will just naturally flow from people who are engaged, enthusiastic, and very well taken care of. And that is in a full 360-degree view. It's not just are they receiving professional development in the technology that they're working on, but it's how is their family doing? What are their hopes and dreams? How can I support that as an employer? How can flexibility benefit them in kind of unfolding those dreams in a direction that works for them and the people around them? So I don't really see it as a work-life balance thing anymore. I just see it as like this is life. People are spending and investing a good portion of their life with me and kind of in my vision, and my quid pro quo is to really focus on how I can provide this environment that's supportive, growth-oriented, and transformative in the highest sense of the word.
That's really inspiring to hear, David. So many companies, they don't focus on their employees, right? We're starting to see a shift more towards that, but traditionally it's people talk about work-life balance, meaning, work ends at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock, and I don't do it until 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock the next morning.
Mm-hmm.
But in our economy now and the way things are working, so much of it's blended together. And I think having a focus on the 360-degree person, like you said, is going to be vital for a company's success.
And I feel like working in the startup environment, this is my legacy. This is my contribution, is trying to create a model that is people sustainable. Because I love the startup environment, except for the fact that it leaves bodies in its wake. It leaves literally people committing suicide, relationships that are wrecked, and employees that are so burned out they can't take it anymore. And so I just feel like if we can really focus on those things and solve them, then the startup world is just continuing to be destined for greatness.
Yeah, definitely agree. So how can people find more information about WorkBright?
Sure. WorkBright is online, WorkBrightcom, and it is there that you'll find all the information about what we're offering to contingent employers and how it can aid the process of hiring dozens to thousands each year.
David, it's been my pleasure talking with you on Colorado TechCast today. You've got such an amazing story from the trenches, from building your own data center in 1999 to founding a cloud-based application that allows companies easily to hire a workforce and have those employees submit their documents from virtually wherever they are, which is critical in the gig economy that I think we're starting to shift towards. So appreciate you coming on the show. And if people have more questions, we'll direct them to workbright.com in the show notes.
Sounds good. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Colorado TechCast. Visit our website at coloradotechcast.com for episode show notes with links to all the great resources we've talked about in this episode. While you're there, click the subscribe button in iTunes so you'll never miss a new episode. I'm Trapper Little, and I'll talk to you again on the next episode of Colorado TechCast.